debate, I think it's kind of it has its own meaning because China is so big, and it's the only language in the world also that writes only meaning and not sounds. Totally, I mean. So in a way, China is a small world. So most of the time when people try to compare China to France, for example, I say, well, you can compare China to Europe actually, and see the whole picture.
Yeah, I mean, although we say West might not be the right term to represent all these Western countries, still, we're talking about two different mindsets.
Yeah, and
Asian,
I think also two
Western,
sort
Oriental.
of historical influences.
Yeah.
You know, Europe pretty much shares the same historical influence. Granted, they're different countries, but a lot of main influences are general for all of Europe, whereas
Agreed.
China is, you know, its own historical influence as well.
Okay, let's get down to all these graphics,
Okay.
all the pictures. Let's take a look at the first one for today.
I'm not sure. Is it a word game about going directly to the point and? I don't
No,
know.
we've done that one.
Yeah.
No,
No.
might this be obstacle?
Now, this is, something like that. It's what it says, it's the ways of dealing with problems.
Okay.
Yes. Well.
So in the West, supposedly, you go charge straight through the problem, and in China, you go around the problem.
Yeah, I guess that really depends on what the problem is, where the problem is. And if the problem is going to that black spot from the front side or just going into that black spot.
You know, I think this relates back to, I think, one of the first pictures we saw about relationships. No, not relationships. It was about ways of communicating, where the picture was a straight line for the West, and then a very
zigzagging
curvy,
for Chinese,
squiggly line for China. And we talked about how it has to do with harmony, and in China, you know, people, rather than be too clashing, they'll go for harmony over, you know, confrontation. So I think this kind of fits in with that.
I guess it's more about the philosophy that Chinese people believe. Say, if you're talking about the final target, okay, that's what it matters. We've reached the final target, no matter what. Just make sure the principles are there. They're not broken. We say, if the principles are there, it's all right for us to be flexible.
Yes, flexible is a good word to bring into this discussion. Because in China, being flexible or flexibility is key.
It's everything.
It really is. And I think that's a great thing for people.
And there's also one thing in Chinese culture, and my teacher teaches me that a lot. When you face problems, and especially between people, and you feel that you won't change somebody. Many times in the West, we try to, you know, we
break it.
Very easily. We enter into very, very heated discussions about topics. We have debates. And even in France, you see even about politics, people talking in a bar. I don't even know that person, and you would talk about this. And even between very good friends, if you have really divergent opinions, you might just not be friends at all after that because of the different opinions.
Argument.
Whereas Chinese people don't judge people on pure opinions, you know. So it's really interesting to feel that sometimes when you have all those problems in China, you're being taught to
respect
other people's opinion, and realize also that you won't change the other person. Whereas Westerners, we tend to want to change the other people.
But the thing is, I mean, we are also taught be more tolerant, to respect others' opinions. At the same time, you have to remind yourself, not everything you believe in is correct.
Sure.
Not everything you believe in is truth.
True, and just to I mean, I agree with everything we've said so far, but just to stand up for Western culture in this area, I mean, there is that element to our education as well of, you know, I mean, it's good to have things you believe in and be very, you know, sure and certain in your opinions, but at the same time to respect, you know, the people you're talking to and things like that. That's also somewhat part of our culture as well.
Yeah, but if we go back to this picture, if you see this picture again, on the left side, it would be, you know, Western mindset. It's in order to reach the final goal, whatever stands in the way, we're going to overcome it. We're going to, you know, just cross it. But basically what we do in China is, you know, our final target is to reach the goal, not to tackle all these problems coming in the way. So the best way to do it is go around it. That's why we say in many cases, the shortest distance is never the straight line.
True. I think a reasonable, a decent difference between
Yeah.
Chinese culture and quite a few Western cultures.
I thought about a story my teacher told me about an old man in China, and two people were arguing. They were arguing about Zhuge Liang, who's famous, minister, or from the Three Kingdoms period.
2,000 years ago.
Exactly. So he has different names, Zhuge Liang or Kong Ming, and two people are arguing. One is saying that Zhuge Liang and Kong Ming is two different people. And obviously it's only one person. And so they argue about this. And so this guy, who obviously knows history and knows that it's the same person, calls the old man passing by and say, "Oh, you have to teach him. Tell him that, help me here, I can bring him to reason. Tell him that it's the same person." And so he talks to the other guy for a while. And at the end, he says, "Yes, you're right. It's indeed two different people." And so the other guy who knows
Even
history
more.
stays with the old guy, and the other guy leaves very happy and proud of himself. He says, "Why did you tell him that? You know that I was right. Why do you help him?" He said, "Well, because they had a bet on before, so maybe he gave him like 10 yuan or something for that." I said, give him 10 yuan and let him be stupid for the rest of his life. But it's a way, it's a joke, but it's a way of reminding you that sometimes when you don't change, when you know that you won't change somebody, just forget about it, let it be, and as Xiaojun was saying, go for the ultimate goal of what you want to do today,
Well, it's obviously an invented story, but let's just take a break, and when we come back, more pictures to show you. And we'll come back to crossover, and here comes the next one.
All right.
Let's take a look. Charlotte? Well, it seems that it snows a lot in the west.
Well, I don't think this has to do with snow. Although cold, maybe. My guess is because it's 3, and I'm getting this from the bowl, looks like with the steam, and not so much from the snowflakes, that these are 3 meals.
Yeah.
And that in China, the red, it's 3 hot meals, so people are used to eating hot food for their meals. And in many Western countries, you
Germany.
might have cold breakfast, a hot lunch, and then a cold dinner.
That's
Germany,
true.
somebody who has spent a few years in Germany told me about that a few days ago. That in Germany, many people were eating cold for dinner.
Like what?
For dinner, even.
Yeah, well, it's very frequent. Even in France, you will have salads. You will have
yeah, that's
also
true.
we call it charcuterie in French. I don't know. It's all the sausages and ham
Cold cuts or
cold
lunch
cuts.
meats.
Exactly,
they call,
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's going to be a lot of those.
Yeah, basically, Chinese people love hot food.
Yes.
Anything hot is supposed to be good for your health.
I remember even seeing old people in China when I just came here. Taking some yogurt and putting it in the microwave.
Heat it up a bit. Yeah, I mean, I think that ties into Chinese medicinal philosophy, or cold is a shock to your system, and something warm or even something hot is much more kind on your whole body's balance and system.
It goes back to the discussion that we had before. It's about Chinese people drink hot water or boiled water.
Hot fruit juice too.
Exactly.
It's not everyone. I mean, you see
Well,
less and less, but still you see that.
You can pretty much get any kind of drink hot here if you ask. I mean, it might not typically be served hot.
Not Cokes, though.
But you could ask. You could ask for them to heat it up for you.
They won't look at you like you were a zombie or something.
No, of course not.
And in the morning, the very much traditional Chinese breakfast would be congee and bread. Anything hot. And once I was traveling in Rome, in Italy, and one of the attractions they had to tourists were basically we have Chinese breakfast.
Oh man, if I had seen that sign, I would have
you would
gone.
go?
I love Chinese breakfast.
Really?
Love them.
I mean,
I love them.
Yeah, I mean, it's all right to have bread or whatever Western for some time, but
It's interesting.
somehow you would miss your Chinese food if you are
so
traveling.
much.
I know foreigners, Westerners, who have been here for more than 10 years and still cannot have anything salty for breakfast.
breakfast.
It has to be sweet.
I love salty. When years ago, my family took a trip to Italy, and I was so happy eating Italian breakfast, actually, because they had salami and cheese and bread and coffee, and I loved it. It made me actually think of Chinese breakfasts because it wasn't just cereal and milk. you
Whereas
know?
in France, it was, well, now it's a lot of cereal and milk, but back in the day, when I was like in the 80s, it was still bread, butter, and jam.
Well, that's good too.
Yeah,
Well, but that's not salty.
Having said that, always hard food, but we do have cold dishes in
Yes.
Chinese cuisine. So we've got some pictures for you. This is rice noodles.
Rice noodle, a
Yeah.
cold
Rice, flat noodles.
flat rice noodles.
Looks nice.
This is
Rice
jellyfish.
noodle.
This is
maybe.
jellyfish.
All cold. These are all served cold.
Yep.
These are starters. I mean,
But again,
it's
these are
usually starters.
appetizers. You wouldn't just
Appetizers.
eat this for your meal.
But it's
No.
interesting that in China, I mean, in proper restaurants, they usually will serve the starters, the cold dishes before. But in many small restaurants, they don't really feel that it's important
I
to
like
put
that
the cold meals before.
Cucumber. Well, we do have cold dishes actually, even in small restaurants, and some
Yeah.
simply made, some maybe more sophisticated.
Yeah.
And these are the ones that we tend to find in most restaurants.
Yes,
Oh, this is the husband and wife lung
Fuji
slices.
fake, yeah.
You're scaring people away
Although
from
I have
China.
to say though, I have to say this. I have a good platform to say this.
Uh-huh.
With the cucumbers, Chinese cucumbers are the best cucumbers in the entire world.
How come?
They
Explain
just
it.
are. They're different. The
mean,
cucumbers you get in the States are nothing compared to the cucumbers here. The cucumbers here are sweet. They don't have, their seeds are small. They're crispy. And look
some
at
good
them.
ones.
They're so much better.
But I still
so much better.
But lots of people still miss the cucumbers of the past. I mean, years ago when it was not so much about the farms. You know, it's naturally.
Oh, natural
Yeah,
products.
I'm
Which is
sure.
why I'm telling you, vegetables in France and fruits are something.
Are good. Well, cucumbers still,
And in China-
hands down. China has the best
And in
cucumbers.
China, honestly, and in China, all vegetables and fruits in the south of China are usually much better than the north.
I guess it's the difference of weather. Yeah.
Weather and
Climate
also
is
soil.
different.
It's more
probably,
water.
too,
Anyway,
yeah.
when it comes down to food, we have lots of stories to tell. But
Just wait a sec, because I scared people away with the husband and wife
Yeah, I wanna make
lung
it up.
slices. We have to say that. What is it exactly? I'm not sure. But
It's like gizzards, right?
what is it?
夫妻肺片. It's
well, it's kind of a liver slices.
liver slices.
liver slice, yeah, there are a few parts, but it's not as scary as it sounds. I was just making a joke with the translation because we talked a lot about this, especially during the Olympics.
You have to
about
stop there.
people, no, about people who were translating literally some names that were here in the tradition
Yeah.
into English. So of course it scares people away.
Anyway, we're not talking about these names or mistranslations.
No more food.
More pictures to show you, but before that, a short break. And we'll come back to crossover. More pictures to discuss.
Hey.
Here is the next one.
One for lunch.
It's Julian.
Huh.
Well, this is pretty
there are
straightforward.
years.
They're
Actually, it
years.
says 1970 and.
I know what it is.
What is it? Is it?
I know what it is.
It's 1970 and 2006.
I know what it is.
Yeah.
It's I know what it is. It's because in Europe the what it means, I guess, from a Chinese point of view, is that the industrialization
Yep.
started much earlier than in China, and now actually because of all the work that has been done for the environment and everything, people in the cities are starting less and less to use cars and polluting ways of transport, and now they use bicycles.
There's been a movement,
in cities.
a green movement.
Whereas in China, everyone was using a bicycle in the cities, and now more and more people can have a car. And even though in some cities now in China you have traffic that is unseen in cities in Europe,
Yeah.
people still want to buy a car.
I mean-
so it's a different, it's different times for in
New
the evolution.
developments in
Yes.
talking about the ways of transport. In the 70s, you drive cars, and these days you ride bicycles. In China, we rode bicycles in the 70s, and nowadays we drive cars.
We're driving
and
cars.
You're talking about low carbon lifestyle. It's just not fair to many of us. And these are the pictures that we see in front of the Tiananmen
That was
Well,
20
Gates.
years ago, I would
Actually,
say.
and you know what? To say something in China's favor, in with regards to transportation, China really does have a low carbon footprint. If you think about how many people China has,
yeah, per
the number
person.
of people who ride bicycles versus drive cars, whereas if you think of America, how many people
It's,
drive cars?
I think it's 5 times less per
Relative
person.
to the
Relatively,
population, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, it's so go China, man, with all the
Well,
bicycles.
well,
Seriously.
be careful. You still have to take care of the environment.
Well, true.
If every Chinese person used the same amount of carbon
Well, I
than
guess.
the U.S. people,
But the thing is, you
the
know,
world would explode.
in China, we do have this saying: you don't actually quit eating because you've got the risk of being choked.
Well, that's
See,
true.
you have the problem. To solve these problems, it's not because of these problems you cancel all the possibilities of development.
One thing, though,
This shows,
It's,
you know, is he the mayor of London?
I'm not.
I'm not
Not
sure,
quite
but I
sure.
know he's a politician.
A public person?
Yes, he's a public person. But you see that even in Beijing, a lot of European and American, even people from the embassies or some big responsible for the big companies, they ride the bicycle
Well, I have
every
to say,
day.
I mean, all over the world now there's a trend, even in China,
Yeah.
where you know,
Even-
people
yeah.
are wanting more and more cars, but still at the same time there's a huge effort to go green and to, you know, choose alternate forms of transportation,
And
including
bicycles-
in the United States as well.
Well,
so.
exactly.
And
Well,
bicycles in China are much more fancy, I guess, sometimes.
That's true. You
I
can
don't know.
ride really fancy bikes.
But you do notice the changes in the past several decades, say, because you used to see that many bicycle repairs just by the road. And one of the owners of the bicycle repairs, he was complaining actually. Years ago, normally he got, you know, business was pretty good, and he got 50 to 6 bicycles. But these
50 to 60 bicycles
yeah, but these days to repair.
a day?
Yeah, day. But these days it's only, you know, less than 10, I guess, in
Yeah.
the cases. But we do notice the changes happening in the past decades. Because, you know, we used to see lots of bicycle repairs just by the road.
Yes, little like vendors,
Yeah.
little stalls.
Yeah, these owners, they're complaining about, you know, declining of business. Because in past days, maybe 20 years ago, they get like dozens of bicycles to be repaired. But these days, there's only 5, 6 a day
A
maximum.
day. Wow, that's a pretty big change.
Yeah, bad news for them, maybe good news for those car owners.
And you can feel it sometimes. Well, usually what you feel is that bicycle repairing and also shoe repairing and key. How do you say duplicate keys?
Key
or
duplicating,
Key
yeah.
duplicating. It's all together.
Locksmiths.
And they understand that you cannot make a living out of
Just doing
just
one.
doing
Yeah.
bicycles in one time. And sometimes I go there to how do you say 打气
Pump your bike.
to pump your tires.
Yeah.
And many times they don't even want money from you. Like how much can I give you?
do it.
And then I give one yuan or 2 yuan to be nice, but they don't even care. And you really realize that they don't make a real living out of it now. But to come back to the new form of energies right now in China. At the same time, I mean, we were saying about the carbon consumption and how it worries the world and everything, especially with the amount of population in China and India. But at the same time, as far as China is concerned, things change so fast in China because once the policy is on, it goes faster than in
And the
country.
whole country mobilizes.
Do you remember with
really,
SARS?
It really does.
Do you remember with SARS when it really became a national phenomenon, and from that moment until they actually solved the problem, it was like 2 or 3 months.
Well,
Whereas because they have the ability to mobilize people and everyone so fast. So I think once the policies will be on, because right now the wind energy, the solar energy, everything is developing so
Yeah.
fast. If someday the government realizes that okay, now we can move on and start a new way of life.
Yeah, well, I guess what you're saying has something to do with what we discussed actually in previous episodes about how the big me and the small me.
Yes.
How you're a part of a group, of a team, instead of just yourself. Because in some cases, I do hear reports about how foreigners are amazed by the achievements accomplished by China in a short time period, like a big project as big as the Olympic Games. And how come you've been able to mobilize the whole country to be dedicated in one project in the short period of time? I guess it's the understanding of bigger me and a small me.
Yep, the group versus the individual. You know, on that note about the Olympics, a friend of mine in the States could not believe with the part in the opening ceremonies for the Beijing Olympics when the
big
thousands, the drummers.
Fall. That's called the fall.
Yeah, the drummers.
The drummers in the beginning.
The ancient drum.
And they were all in unison. And my friend could not believe that so many people could be so in unison.
You want some inside information about that? I was on a show right after the Olympics with Chen Weiya, who was the vice director of Zhang Yimou. And I asked him, because I'm a musician, and I know one thing, sound travels very slowly in the air.
Yes.
So if you have that many people, there is no way the person who is over there and the person over there, there's no way they hear the sound they make at the same time. There is a delay.
But they do have the headphones.
Yes, they had the
headphones.
headphones.
And they do
exactly. So I asked him that, and he said, well, you couldn't see it on the cameras, but they all had this.
But even so,
it's unbelievable.
I mean,
yes,
the fact that they could all be in such unison was very impressive, and I think that comes down to big me, little me as well.
Exactly.
You know.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Chi Xiaojun with Charlotte and Julian. Again, another episode about the differences between China.
Is that the one?
Yeah, number 6.
Number 6.
Oh yes.
Between Chinese lifestyle and Western lifestyle. Basically, it's German, because this is again based on the graphics designed by Liu Yang, the Chinese-German designer. So she's lived in both cultures for many years, and she's got the opportunity to compare the cultures and lifestyles in the two different worlds.
Today's our 6th episode on discussing her graphics.
Interesting.
It just shows how many differences we do have.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about.
Well, that's it. It's an interesting project. I mean, even if you don't agree with everything, but it makes us talk.
Well, you can agree, you can disagree, and basically this is what it is. And everyone has your own interpretations. Everyone has your own understandings of the lifestyle that you live in your world. So basically, we're just offering what we think about these lifestyles. So let's just get started with the first picture for today, Julian.
Just to clarify, the red represents China and the blue represents the West.
That's why it's clear when you know it.
We see here you've got a knife and fork for China, and then chopsticks and a Chinese spoon for
in the big cities.
The West.
Yes.
Basically, what it's saying is it says what is in trend in the two societies. Say in the West, people think using chopsticks and spoons is cool, is a trendy thing to do. While in China, we tend to say using knives and forks to be a trendy thing to do.
This is. I mean, I don't think there's much to talk about on this topic, because it's obvious that people like to try new things and meet other cultures.
And the other thing is the grass is always greener on the other side. So you always kind of are interested in what you don't have or what isn't a daily thing for you.
You don't have that, you treasure that, or you want to have a tryout, and this is also something new, something fun to do.
Yeah, or you're just curious about it, or it's more fun because it's different.
To put it on another, well, I wouldn't say another level, but to just kind of take it back to actually everyday life. I think you see, if you think about the US, it would be LA or New York. If you think of China, it would be Shanghai, Beijing. Those cities obviously have a lot of people who in their everyday life eat, for Chinese people, Western food, the Western way with knife and forks. and also for Western people,
Chinese
Asian
food.
food. I wouldn't say Chinese because chopsticks and the kind of Chinese
true.
spoon. This is Asian. This is not
Okay.
only Chinese. So they eat with chopsticks because they eat sushi, they eat
Thai
sashimi,
food.
they eat Thai food, Vietnamese food, Korean food, Chinese food. Eating Asian. You have a lot of restaurants in the West that are Asian, not
Yeah.
only Chinese.
Well, that is a Chinese invention in the first place, anyway. Anyway, but we do see the communication of different styles.
Yes.
We have this World Expo in Shanghai, and many foreigners, we're saying lots of foreigners know how to use chopsticks, but not everyone, and it might be very difficult for some. And there is a smart girl, a Chinese girl. She's invented, a very useful kind of like a glove. You put your fingers in, and then that way you control chopsticks very easily and very effectively.
You know what that makes me think of? It's not for chopsticks, but in the States we have something we call a spork, which is a
Spork.
spoon fork.
Spoon fork. Yes.
It's a fork that's kind of, it can be used as a spoon and as a fork.
You get that in the plane
Ah,
sometimes.
right. Yeah.
As a plastic spork.
Yeah,
Yes,
a
you get that
spork.
in the plane.
Yeah, I
with
mean-
the meal.
all these fantastic inventions.
Yep.
But by the way,
Yeah.
here, before you get to the next picture, you know about Western or Chinese and the mixture of everything. There's an interesting phenomenon about the food too, because a lot of those, the kind of so-called chains of tea houses you have in China that where you can eat Western style food, and the menus of Western style food, you eat it with a knife and a fork, but it's still, it can be rice or noodles and stuff. And it's interesting because for Chinese people, they call that Western food, and eat that with a fork and knife because they think it's Western food.
And it's not Western
And
at
for
all.
Westerners who come to China, because they're used to Chinese food that is kind of Westernized in the West, they see that, oh, this is typical Chinese food, and they ask for the chopsticks. And I've seen that so
Wow,
many
what a
times.
perfect combination. That is the niche market. Anyway, let's move on to the next picture.
I think this might be the role of the child in a family. In China, the child is the center of the parents' and the grandparents' life.
Yeah,
they
on the
revolve
right side,
around,
yeah.
the red side. They revolve around the child. And in the West, the child is more with the parents, and the grandparents are there, but not the way it is in China.
Yeah,
But
basically it also connects to what we discussed about elderly people's life and how the elderly people might have a very important role to play in taking care of the grandchildren.
Yes, but because if we discuss about that, there's one thing that comes back and back when we discuss different cultures, which is some differences are just differences about different times. Whereas, when you talk about, freedom of the students at school or the relationship between students and teachers, you see the US or Europe in the 1950s or 60s, it was much harsher from the teachers on the students than now even in China. So sometimes it's not about cultures, it's about different times. And here it's typical. The pictures about China with the child being the center of attention of the whole family in several generations. This is typical post-1980s phenomenon.
Yeah, but this also has something to do with the one-child policy.
Exactly.
Right.
If you have only one child for one generation, sometimes if it's twins, then you've got two children.
But again, though, I agree completely that it is. I mean, 1980 being, once with the one-child policy really coming into effect. But I do think historically, the children, the role of children in a family, in a society is quite like that picture.
It's like a combined glue,
Yes, even if we go back past 1980, earlier. They've held a very high position in the family structure.
Well, I understand that, but it still comes back to how many children you have. Because in a family, my teacher was telling me that when he grew up, which was the 1940s and the beginning of the 50s, they were like 11 or 12 children in the family.
Oh, wow.
Well, back then that was it. I mean,
Big
a lot of
family.
families, there was
Yeah.
no one-child policy back then. So he was telling me that what they were doing was basically, when they were not at school, they were just playing outside, and there would be no old people or parents, you know, taking care of them all day long. They were playing outside all day long and just come back for dinner.
I
and,
agree, but I still think the role of the child in the family. It's not so much, you know, how much they're attended to necessarily, but I don't know. I think
for me, it's not really cultural differences. It depends on so many things. Even if you look back, let's say 100 years in China, there have been since the end of the Qing dynasty, and look at all the changes, all the different generations. For every 10 years or every few years, you can say that there have been big changes enough for people to put all their hopes on the next generation, on their children, and hoping. You know, even in the 1920s and 30s, so many of the Chinese, the good families, the elite, they would go abroad to study. They were also the hope of the country. And then, and then also after the liberation in '49, and after the Cultural Revolution, when so many children didn't go to school the way they wanted to, and suddenly the generation that grows up after Deng Xiaoping,
the opening of policy.
And those ones become, you know, the hope of the next generation. It has been like that all the time. So in China, the past 100 years have been so complicated, and people have been wanting for and hoping that the really, really great left will come in the next generation so much.
I don't want to go back that early, I say 100 years. But if you see this picture from a different angle, say in 20, 30 years' time, when the child grows up, when he's got his or she's got her family, and that means because you're the only child, you have to take care of all these elderly people.
yes.
Your parents, and maybe your spouse's parents.
Yes.
And possibly the grandparents.
Yes, and you don't have siblings to share in that responsibility with you. It will be interesting to see how that will change this picture.
Yeah.
Because it will change. It has to change.
So that's why you were talking about the role of the children. I was focusing more on the attention they get.
Right.
So it's different.
It's been hotly debated actually among intellectuals, the scholars, or social scientists. There are working maybe on the, I don't know if there is an ideal way, they're working on it to solve the potential problem of one child, one couple taking care of all these elderly people.
Yeah.
But anyway, we'll take a short break, and when we come back, more graphics to share with you. And we'll come back to Crossover, and we've got more pictures to show you. And Julian,
This is interesting.
This is tough.
It's a tough one, yeah. Well, give you some clue. It's more about, you know, different attitudes towards novelties or new things.
Well, then
basically what it's saying, say in the West, people tend to keep a distance and observe the new things from a distance.
You know,
while in China, Chinese people tend to be much closer to the new things, and they want to have the new things in hand and have a touch.
I think I understand what she means, but it has to do with the times also in China, because for the past 30 years it has developed so fast, especially the younger generations. Like in a blink of an eye, some things have, you know, disappeared in the everyday life. The attention to a lot of traditions has disappeared. So to some point, I think when people say, okay, I forget about this, I want to live a modern life, and especially there's no religion in China the way it is in the West, where it's really sometimes the core of the way people think, whereas in China, it has never been like that. So I think in China, when they say no to the traditions, it's easier to suddenly absorb a lot of new things, whereas in the West, you still have so many people in the US, it's the same, who have a religion, who have traditions that will stay here. So they appear to be very open, but at the end,
very conservative.
They are very conservative.
You know, it might also have something, I mean, this is taking the picture a little, sort of looking at it a little differently, but it has been my experience, you know, with, if you look at it in a more simple way, like there's, say, something, this cup is very interesting, for example. It's some new cup. and you have, say, an American and a Chinese person in the same room looking at this weird cup, the American might not come up and touch it and go like that, but the Chinese person might.
And also, this has something to do with the fact that we are raised to have an opinion on everything.
Oh, and also, we're also raised, look, don't touch. That's one
that's
of
another
the first
thing.
things that your parents will teach you as a child is you can look, but you can't touch.
Well,
maybe.
I'm not quite sure about this picture because I don't feel that strongly in this regard. I mean, when the Chinese people are more curious than Westerners, whether they, tend to. Well, we do see people do lots of touchings in these tourist spots, and that's why we see many parts of a line or a sculpture shiny.
That's true.
But that's because sometimes they were told by the tourist guides, it brings you good luck if you have a touch on the surface, on the foot, or anywhere. But I'm not quite sure.
You know what I just brought to the discussion? I'm not sure. I mean, everyone can discuss about it. I think it's interesting. Because we were talking about the differences between Western and Eastern philosophy, especially the Chinese philosophy, where you're raised to basically, not try to change everything and try to kind of absorb everything around more. And I think we are raised in the West much more to have an opinion on a lot of things, whereas Chinese people, they don't judge people on pure opinions. And you can talk about your opinions much more freely.
So what does that have to do with new things?
Well, it has to do with new things because I think Western people, we rely more easily to something they know of, they heard about, and will say, this is nothing. Whereas Chinese people, sometimes they are not too eager to have an opinion on that thing.
Well, we might have an opinion, but it's only we are told not impose
that way.
Not impose your opinions on someone else.
With culture, it's the same. You know how Chinese people, the last 100 years, look, the Western culture is a main topic in Chinese everyday life, in the newspapers, in the medias, whereas, the Eastern culture is more a fashion thing or a mysterious thing.
Not so much anymore, but now I think it's much more a daily part of our news and...
I guess, China is now ready to, maybe Chinese people tend to think it's no harm if I have a little tryout with the new stuff, the new gadgets. That's why we see all these new models of mobile phones being so well in China. All these new models, maybe the latest developments
like this one
in
China.
That's true. You see more. Keep your phone in your pocket. You do see a much faster turnover with people. I'll see a friend one day, and maybe a month later, that my friend will have a new phone, the latest, this phone, or the latest that phone, or camera, or fashion even, or that's a good point.
And last point about philosophy, and then we can talk about some of that later.
You're going back to 100 years again, huh?
No. Well, much more. It's maybe 2,500 years ago. In the tradition, we were saying how the Chinese philosophy teaches you to adapt yourself to the environment and not to try to change everything. So in the core of the Chinese philosophy and the society, Chinese people adapt to new things much quicker than foreigners that tend to want to change the new things that come, or not letting them be themselves. Chinese people, as we say, they can go around everything. They can embrace everything, as we say, 海纳百川, to have like the if you translate that as it's a Chinese proverb that means the sea can englobe all the rivers.
Yeah, you can put the whole sea in the heart.
I think this might have something to do with that.
Maybe.
But how would you translate this story then? iPhone 4 or iPhones and iPads, you see the long queues even several days before its official launch. I guess that shows also that also shows the curiosity of Western consumers.
That's true.
Sure.
That's true. I was in the States for the launch of the iPhone 4, and there was a huge line of people outside the Apple Store waiting to get their new iPhone.
To have the new gadget.
I don't understand it. I'm not a...
Anyway, we'll move on, and before we present more graphics, a short break. And welcome back to Crossover, and here comes the final picture for this series. Let's just take a look.
Woo! We're at the end. Just to clarify again, red is representative of China and blue is representative of Germany and maybe
we can
Western
see-
countries.
So
Well,
is
we
it
can
the
see
view?
the teapot, rice, chopsticks, or maybe is it a banana? Or-
A
think-
sausage?
It might
oh,
be.
no. She's German. That's a sausage.
Okay.
That's a sausage
That's a mug of beer.
Beer.
And that's a, you know,
A traditional
top
German
hat.
hat.
Basically, it's about the how would you case? It's the
Perception, I think.
perception of each other's.
Right. So in China, their perception of, say, Germans would be very, very generalizing here, but a tall hat, eating sausages, and
Sausage.
drinking beer. Whereas in Germany, you know, people might think of China as chopsticks and a bowl of rice, a teapot, and a traditional Chinese
Yeah,
hat.
I guess it's pretty much true with teapot because it's tea drinking country and,
And the rice.
we eat rice.
So the
And the hat too.
The hat, it's
Oh,
more
yeah,
about,
in
say, this is a farming
some
culture, a
areas.
farming, yeah. In the early, in the 1980s, Zhang Yimou's film, The Red Sorghum, it was a huge success, especially in the West, and it won the, is it Golden Bear Award in
In
Berlin?
Berlin, yes.
Film Festival. But back in China, it was a huge success, but it was a huge debate. Saying, Zhang Yimou, you might be a great director, but how come you always chose subjects like showing the backward side of Chinese development of the country?
This is, I mean, I always debate of that with my Chinese friends because I'm saying, first of all, a movie director is not, he doesn't work, you know, for the
Government.
tourism bureau or,
Right.
you know, he works for himself. So what he does is he picks a topic. It might be the only family in the whole China that is like this. And it is worth it. It's even more worth of doing a film. And if that film is watched by many people, it's their problem if they think that the whole China is like that. And also, I mean, because a lot of the Chinese friends I have come from cities, obviously. I haven't experienced the life in China in the small villages or countryside. And neither have most of the Chinese people who grew up in cities. So who are we to say that this does not represent China? It's
But-
one side of China, and it's actually, it used to be a big part of the
True, I
population,
don't think
and it's
the
not a bad thing.
I don't think that the debate is it's not a side of China. I think the debate is that it's
Why you are showing this
why are you
side?
showing that side as opposed to
You can...
Because he grew up there too, and, he
And
saw-
no. What the critics were saying at the time were, okay, Zhang Yimou, you might be doing this because you want to win a prize. You want to, you know, cater to the taste of Western critics
Or
instead of
appeal-
showing the positive picture of your country.
appeal to the stereotype.
But-
I mean that's artistic license, I guess. I mean, I read Sorghum. That was a great film. I thoroughly enjoyed that film.
Is it the Hong Gaoliang, right?
Yeah.
Yes, but yes, and honestly, because back then, at the time, let's say he would be doing a show about the skyscrapers in Shanghai. I mean, for Chinese people, it would be far away from their lives, so they wouldn't like to watch it. For Westerners, they would find it so funny because it's only like 0.something% of the Chinese people, and foreigners would also hate the film. Where is the point?
Well, I think though, not to get stuck on a movie debate, but I do think though that especially back when Hong Gaoliang came out, there really weren't that many movies about China today out on the international scene. And so maybe that's in part why the debate began, because it's not like today where you can see all kinds of movies. You can
But-
see movies like that, and you can see modern, you know.
But obviously, movies are very important in giving people that impression of
Absolutely.
how, you know, the image of a country's people.
Also, one thing, because in China you have a new generation of people now who consider a movie as a part of their entertainment. And so they don't like to see movies like that. Whereas for most European, I wouldn't say most, but for a big part of European people, and obviously all the Europeans who are judges on those big competitions, movie has to be a mirror of people's life. And movie is art. So art can reflect on reflect on
reality.
everything, any reality, even if it's, as I said, only one family among a billion people. It's a reality.
And I have to say, the picture that represented Germany with the sausage and the beer mug, I mean, that's actually an image of Germany that I think people all over the world might have.
Yes.
You know, beer. There are German beer festivals all over the world.
yes.
I think it's up to, at the end of the day, it's up to education, it's up to every individual in any country. I mean, you cannot say, let's say, Charlotte would drink water like this, and I would say, oh, you Americans drink like this. You know, it's up to me to realize that to some point I cannot generalize like this after seeing one movie or one behavior. So, I mean, in any country, you will have people like that who see one movie and say, oh, it's like that in that country. Well, you cannot blame the director for that, or blame a book, or blame even a government, or anything. You blame only individuals.
And we are very much now these days globalized, and we are talking about this global village. When you drink Starbucks coffee, okay, you might be anywhere.
Right, and I was just going to say, you know, especially now more than ever before in the history of this world, you know, we're so international, and everyone is, you know, it's so easy to travel.